It's 2024, and Aaron Rodgers emerges from his darkness retreat only to find out he's surprisingly surrounded by a lot of talent, top talent on this New York Jets football team, and he realizes this might be his last big push in order to get his name in the history books as a two-time Super Bowl winning quarterback. We're going to break it down in this video today. Huddle up, everybody. We're going to be talking about the recent controversy around Aaron Rodgers. I know, the guy's always surrounded by some kind of weird controversy. This one's a little bit more comedic, I'll give you that. But also talking about the best kind of news for New York Jets fans, how they get to the Super Bowl this season, and honestly, how this season might be a failure if they don't. If you're new here, I'm Nate. We are talking the biggest news in sports every day on this channel, so make sure that you get subbed up to this channel so you don't miss out on any of the action. In addition to that, as you can see here, I'm in Ben's studio, and tomorrow we're hoping to go with a longer form discussion on things like Aaron Rodgers, the New York Jets, this top rated talent on this football team. PFF, Pro Football Focus, has them top rated in multiple categories. We're going to talk a little bit about that today, and then we're going to hear from the boys on that one later tomorrow. So make sure you come back for that. But the preponderance of evidence suggests that the Jets have an excellent opportunity in front of them right now, and the only thing that can hold them back is an Aaron Rodgers injury, I suppose, or another choke in the playoffs, but that might have been too far. Let me know before we break down this video, however, do the Jets have what it takes to be a Super Bowl, legitimate Super Bowl contender this season? Do the Jets have what it takes? Because I would argue from the data, from the stats, from Pro Football Focus's point of view, they do. However, there are other folks like the Stink, Mark Schlereth, who might feel differently. Let's break that down in the video, but let me know in the comments first what you think. Do the Jets have a legitimate chance to be a Super Bowl contender? It feels like if Aaron Rodgers is healthy, if all of this, I hate to say if all of the stars are healthy, because isn't that always the easiest caveat? But if Aaron Rodgers is healthy, if Breece Hall is healthy, then of course they have an opportunity, right? Let me know in the comments what you think. I look forward to joining you there. But let's talk first about some of the latest controversy around Aaron Rodgers, and it comes from the Stink's mouth himself, saying Aaron Rodgers, four-time MVP, won Super Bowl. One. We called the Green Bay Packers the dynasty that never was, said Schlereth. In a possible attempt to gain relevancy, Schlereth proceeded to argue that the absence of multiple Super Bowl victories excludes Rodgers from being considered an all-time great, which this is going to be an interesting one, but listen to what he said. If you invite the greatest quarterbacks of all time to a dinner, and it's like Thanksgiving, and there's one main table and then the kids' table on the side, Aaron Rodgers is sitting at the kids' table because he's only got one championship. You don't get to sit with Joe Montana and Tom Brady and multiple Super Bowl winners at the big boy table. I'm sorry, said Schlereth. Now, great article, by the way, from Sporting News, but to be fair to Rodgers, one Super Bowl title and one Super Bowl MVP award is a lot more than almost every active or retired NFL quarterback can claim. The 40-year-old Rodgers has 12 career postseason victories, something the Jets haven't tasted since 2010, which is a wild time because that's when Rodgers last won a Super Bowl. Rodgers is ninth amongst all all-time NFL passing leaders in yards and fifth in touchdown passes. Whether Schlereth cares to recognize it, Rodgers is an all-time great, just like the Hall of Famer Dan Marino, Jim Kelly, neither of whom ever claimed a Super Bowl title, which is an interesting one, right? You bring up Dan Marino, who didn't even get it. And I suppose the real question would be to ask Mark Schlereth, hey, what do you think about that, Mr. Offensive Lineman? How do you feel about, Dan Marino? Where does he rate in that conversation? Because if you're going to go after Rodgers, who's still playing, by the way, how are you going to feel about a guy who never even got the ring, who went but never had it? So this is where it's interesting. Now, I want to first preface this next section to this positive news, I want to say. I think this is all very good news for Jets fans, but I want to preface this to say there are a handful of teams that are high on PFF's grades. The Jets and the Lions and the 49ers find themselves really high across a lot of unit group categories. So if I'm grading an entire unit, linebacker core, wide receiver core, and I'm grading it as an entire unit, how that stacks up, right? The Jets, it's kind of crazy. Think about this, okay? So you've got one of the best quarterbacks in the league. There's no argument there. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the league, when healthy, for sure. Number 5 offensive line, okay? That's pretty good. That is something that the 49ers, for example, cannot say. The Lions can say. I think they're number 1 offensive line, okay? Middle of the pack wide receiving core, but we'll come back to that in a minute. Top 10 running back room, basically only because of Breece Hall, okay? Then number 1 defensive line, number 1 linebacker core, and number 1 secondary. I mean, I'm sure Jets fans are sitting on that like, yeah, that's what we've been saying. We've been waiting for everybody to appreciate it. That is pretty wild, and I think it's something that by itself, if you see just this data and forget about what team it is, you say you have a top 10 quarterback, a future Hall of Famer quarterback, and you have a middle of the pack wide receiving core, but you have a top 10 running back room, top 5 offensive line, number 1 on all 3 unit groups on the defensive side of the ball, you would say that team is a contender for sure. Defenses win championships. That's a contender of a team, right? Just to give you some backing on what I'm saying here, so you know I'm not just making stuff up here. If I can figure out how to get all these little hotkeys to work for me. There we go. So there's your number 5, okay, offensive line. And it's really strong where you want it to be strong. I think interior offensive linemen are important, but if you have your 2 tackles sorted out, you can scheme to fix a little hole in the interior. So they've got the 2 tackles figured out. Potentially the best tackle duo in the league, okay? Then in running back, Breece Hall, of course, as mentioned. So that solves a lot of the problems for you. Great running back. You look at like San Francisco 49ers, right? Good running backs, running back 2, running back 3, good. But does it matter? You got Christian McCaffrey, what does it matter, right? Okay, defensive line. Speaking of 49ers, they're right there too. So Jets ranked number 1 defensive line. Linebacker core. This is a funny one because I think Dre Greenlaw is not injured. Then maybe San Francisco 49ers end up number 1 on that list. But the Jets get number 1 in the linebacker room. And then, of course, number 1 in the secondary. So, I mean, you see what I'm saying. Pause the screen if you want to read the whole thing. That would be like a 20-minute video if I read all of those to you. But do you get what I'm getting at? So we have a lot to break down tomorrow when we're on the channel with Ben, with Aaron, hopefully all 3 of us in one video together, probably longer form so that we can really get into some of these details here and ask some questions. So you put Rodgers up next to Dan Marino. Dan Marino didn't get a Super Bowl ring, but let's just assume they're in the same category here in terms of the kids' table. If Dan Marino got invited to the party at all, I suppose. Maybe Schlereth would say no to that. But then on top of that, we have to talk about, is this team a legitimate title contender right now? And if not, why not? That's a really interesting question. What is the number 1 reason the Jets, and let me know in the comments on this one. Get me prepared for the video tomorrow. Let me know in the comments what you think about that. If this New York Jets team is not a title contender, what's the reason? Who is the reason? Maybe is the better question. I think you know what I'm getting at. Who is the reason the Jets are not a number 1 contender? Or a contender, maybe not number 1. That was a bit of a stretch. I think 49ers number 1 for sure. But, you know, whatever the case is, I'm biased on that one. Let me know what you think in the comments. Look forward to joining you there as always. This has been super fun. It's cool to be in this studio. I'm a little out of my element here. I feel a little funny, but we're going to have a great time tomorrow having a longer form discussion about all of this. As always, make sure you get subscribed so you don't miss it on all of it. Come back tomorrow for the video. Comment on this video. Help me prepare for tomorrow's video so that I don't look like a knucklehead out there. As always, thanks for being here.